Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. At 5:43 a.m., Miles Donovan was jolted awake by a call claiming his fully owned home now belonged to an HOA he'd never joined. Within hours, strangers arrived, threats followed, and his name vanished from public records. What began as a lie turned into a war for his very existence. I was jolted awake at exactly 5:43 in the morning by the sharp, uninvited buzzing of my phone. At that hour, only two types of calls exist: family emergencies or professional disasters. Groggy and half-blind, I fumbled for the device on my nightstand, squinting at the unknown number flashing on the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Mr. Donovan," a voice said, curt and strangely cheerful. "Why are you still at the property? You're supposed to be out by 9. It's eviction day." I blinked, still trying to piece together where I was and what dimension this call had landed in from. "Eviction day?" "Yes, sir. You were notified a month ago. The property was declared abandoned. It has reverted to Silverbrush Lake's HOA control. Please have your things removed by 9. I sat upright, instantly awake. Who the hell is this? "This is Silverbrush Lake's Homeowners Association. This is just a courtesy call. You're technically trespassing at this point, and we'd like to avoid escalation." "Courtesy call," I repeated, voice flat. "You must be joking." I hung up, not because the conversation was over, but because I refused to let it continue without coffee and pants. My mind snapped to full alert. I wasn't even part of an HOA. My house sat nestled in a heavily wooded ridge, completely outside the Silverbrush Lakes development. The property was fully mine, 100% private, bought directly from the prior owner with a notarized title deed and a clean registry file. If anyone had the nerve to declare it abandoned, they'd either lost their minds or had found a creative way to commit fraud. I threw on jeans and headed straight to my office at the back of the house. Pulling up my property records, I double-checked everything. Title number, land parcel, recorded date, all matched. Not a single mention of HOA jurisdiction. Then, just as I opened my saved scanned documents, I saw the first sign of escalation. A dark-colored SUV slowed at the edge of my gravel driveway, pausing longer than any normal vehicle would. Then it pulled in. Two men stepped out. One wore a branded windbreaker with the Silverbrush Lakes HOA emblem. The other carried a clipboard and a padded folder. I silently activated the audio recorder embedded in my desk keychain and clipped it to my belt, then walked outside. "Mr. Donovan?" asked clipboard guy without introducing himself. "We're here on behalf of Silverbrush Lakes HOA. We have documents confirming the transfer of this parcel into community control due to non-use and abandonment." "You mean my home?" I said calmly, hands in my hoodie pocket. "The property has been declared dormant for over 90 days. No community visibility, no curb activity, and multiple lack of response notices. It was voted on by emergency session and added back to the communal registry as of last week." "Emergency session," I echoed. "No curb activity? My house doesn't have a curb. It has deer." The other guy smirked but kept quiet. Clipboard guy opened the folder and revealed a photo, a wide shot of my yard, leaf-strewn and quiet, taken while I had been on a field assignment in Nevada. "This image confirms absence of use. We followed Section 7 of Silverbrush Lake's retention policy. The property was previously misclassified in a legacy exclusion zone, but the board has corrected that." "You people do realize," I said slowly, "that this land was never part of your development. I have the original deed signed by the seller, the county, and 3 witnesses. I paid cash. This isn't HOA land. According to our updated district map," he said, flipping pages, "you're part of the adjusted boundary adopted last fiscal cycle." "And according to reality," I replied, pulling my own document from the inner pocket of my coat. "I'm not. This is notarized. This is public record. And this," I waved vaguely at their folder of fiction, "is nonsense. You've got about 30 seconds to remove yourselves before I call the sheriff." Both men paused. Then the smirker leaned closer. "You don't know how this place works," he said, voice low and smug. "Karen doesn't like being told no." They turned, folder in hand, and left. No apologies, no names, just the rumble of tires down gravel as the SUV reversed down the driveway. I watched them go, breathing steadily. The adrenaline was rising, but I pushed it down. I'd seen bureaucratic abuse before. I used to investigate it for a living. But this was different. This was personal. As I turned back toward the house, I caught myself staring at the tree line, listening, For what? I wasn't sure, but something had shifted. This wasn't just a mistake. It was the beginning of something bigger. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of fear. Fear is a luxury for people who aren't trained to recognize systems of fraud in real time. What I felt was calculation. My mind was racing through protocols, legal pathways, precedents. Because what had happened this morning wasn't a prank or a clerical error. It was a hostile maneuver, a very deliberate one. By 7 that morning, I was already drafting a formal objection to the county recorder's office. I knew the process well enough to handle the filings myself. Within the hour, I submitted an injunction request to freeze any and all pending actions on my parcel. I wasn't about to let someone bulldoze their way into my deed using amateur-grade intimidation and badly staged photos. But just to be sure, I logged into the county's real estate transfer portal to verify the current status of my land. And that's when the real alarm bells went off. A new entry had been registered, quietly, just 5 days ago. According to the log, parcel 47B Alpha 611, my land, had been reacquired for community benefit by a certified action of Silverbrush Lakes HOA, citing Article 12, Abandonment and Reclamation. There was a digital signature, a notarized seal, a file attached, Special Emergency Proceedings, Property Reclamation Protocol, 2025, July 31st.pdf. I downloaded it. Inside was a laughable Frankenstein of a document. It claimed the property had been left uninhabited for over 90 days, that the owner had ceased utility service, that certified notices had gone unanswered, and that upon unanimous board vote, the property was entered into HOA control. Pending reallocation. Most damningly, the paperwork said the house had no active title holder due to failure to confirm presence. I scrolled in disbelief. There was even a line claiming I had voluntarily surrendered my rights by not attending a verification inspection held by the HOA on July 15th. I'd been in Nevada on federal business. I hadn't received a single letter. There was no door notice, no email, no certified mail, nothing. Just a stealthy overwrite of my ownership behind my back. I picked up the phone and called the clerk at the regional title office, someone I'd worked with during a previous investigation. I explained the situation briefly. When I read her the transfer number, there was a pause. "We've seen a couple of these recently," she said. "Always the same HOA, Silverbrush Lakes. We're digging into it. Quietly." "Quietly?" I asked. She lowered her voice. "They've got someone inside. Registry tech. They process the updates late at night. Make it look like routine housekeeping. There have been complaints, but no formal charges yet." "You want me to flag this?" "Flag it," I said, "and lock the record. I'm issuing a cease action today." After the call, I drove straight to the county land office with hard copies of everything. I filed a formal request for protective hold on the parcel, along with notarized proof of ownership, tax records, and surveillance logs from the past 6 months. I also attached a notarized affidavit explaining that I had been out of state on official business and provided federal proof of deployment. They time-stamped everything. By the time I returned home, a black sedan was idling on the road just outside my driveway, not on the property, but close enough to watch. It didn't have tags and the windows were tinted. I stood in the open a moment, staring. Eventually, the driver made a slow U-turn and drove off without stopping. Paranoia, maybe. But when you find your name missing from your own deed, a little paranoia is survival instinct. That night, I didn't sleep again. I reviewed all the documentation, comparing signatures, timestamps, registry metadata. The notary listed on the HOA's reclamation form, she was real, but retired 3 years ago. The digital stamp had been lifted from a different county office. I knew the patterns. These weren't just amateurs. This was a system. So I did what I was trained to do. I built a file. I started mapping the dates, creating a visual chain of action. I cataloged the day the false abandonment protocol was created, the date I left for my federal assignment, the time the supposed HOA vote occurred, the appearance of the men at my door, the timing of the false transfer into registry. By midnight, the picture was clear. Someone inside the HOA had used my absence to manufacture an emergency acquisition, filed it under a fake public hearing, and pushed it through with a fraudulent stamp. It was methodical, professional. Not their first time. I emailed the file, encrypted, to 3 different attorneys I trusted, and I made one more call, this time to an investigator I'd worked with during a corruption probe in Arizona. Her voice was dry, familiar. Let me guess, she said. Small town HOA, fake abandonment, a property that suddenly belongs to a community fund. Bingo, I replied. Send me everything. I'll put it in front of someone real. As I hung up, I looked around my living room. The one they claimed was empty. The lamps, the books, the coffee mug on the table, my boots by the door, the firewood stacked out back. My house wasn't abandoned. But they were trying to erase me like I never existed. The morning after I submitted my hold request, I was halfway through rechecking the perimeter cameras when I heard the sound of tires on gravel again. Not the slow, tentative crawl of a delivery driver or an accidental tourist. This was deliberate, steady, rehearsed. A dark Lexus SUV pulled into the bottom of my driveway. I didn't recognize the car, but I didn't need to. I knew who it was before she even stepped out. Karen Brinslin. She emerged like she was stepping onto a runway. Pristine blazer, oversized sunglasses, lips pressed into a tight, diplomatic smile. Her gait had the exaggerated calm of someone trying very hard to look unbothered. She walked with a kind of false serenity that screamed performance. I stayed on the porch, arms crossed, waiting. She waved like we were old friends. I didn't wave back. Mr. Donovan, she called, voice sweet and completely unearned. Do you have a moment? I think we got off on the wrong foot. No, I said flatly. I think we landed exactly where we were supposed to. That stopped her for half a second, but she pushed forward, climbing the porch stairs slowly, as if trying not to spook a wild animal. I'd really prefer to resolve this without legal escalation, she said, hands neatly folded in front of her like a school principal trying to reason with a truant. This whole thing, the emergency protocol, the notices, I'll admit it might have been poorly handled. Poorly handled, I repeated. I'm willing to admit that we may have made assumptions, she said, inching closer, as if distance were the real problem here. When a property is left dormant for that long, I mean no community activity, no HOA registration, no attendance at meetings, well, our board acted on the best information available. I'm not part of your HOA, I said calmly. I never was, and your board has no jurisdiction on this land. Karen's expression faltered for just a breath. Then she recovered, stepping into the character again. I understand your position, truly, she said. But the thing is, we've already filed the integration documents. It's messy to undo now. People get confused. Property lines start to feel hypothetical. Hypothetical, I asked. She softened her voice. We don't have to make this a public mess. I can recommend the board rescind the reclamation protocol quietly. We'll withdraw the documents, retroactively void the action. It'll be like it never happened. But I'd need you to withdraw your filings with the county. The hold request. The fraud complaints, I didn't move. I can even offer to pay your legal filing fees, she added quickly. As a gesture of goodwill, no need for lawyers, no need for anyone else to get involved. I let a long silence stretch between us. She held her breath, expecting me to crack. Instead, I smiled, the kind of smile I used to give bad actors in deposition rooms just before I buried them in evidence. You tried to steal my house, I said, and now you want to erase the evidence. Karen blinked. The mask cracked for half a second. This doesn't have to get ugly, she said, the false cheer in her voice thinning out. You already made it ugly, I said. I'm not pulling a single filing. And I'm certainly not accepting hush money from someone who commits document fraud with a smile on her face. That was the moment her posture shifted. Gone was the faux diplomacy, the pleasant negotiation. Her back straightened, her lips tightened, and her eyes narrowed like knives. You really want to go to war with me? She asked, voice suddenly flat. I don't need to go to war, I said. I just need to let the facts speak. Karen took a step closer. I didn't back away. You should know, she said quietly. People who fight me don't sleep well for long. Fires happen, accidents. Things get missed in the system. Your type, federal types, always think you're immune. But this isn't DC, Miles. This is Colorado, and we handle things differently out here. I stared at her. Her smile returned, but it wasn't friendly. It was the kind of smile that came right before someone burned your house down and blamed it on lightning. She turned to leave without waiting for another word, descended the steps, and got back into her car with eerie calm. The SUV reversed down the drive, disappearing into the pines. I stood there a while longer, letting the silence settle around me like ash. Then I walked back inside and removed the audio recorder from my waistband. Every word she'd said, the veiled threats, the bribery, the admissions, was safely saved. High fidelity, clear audio, time-stamped. date stamped, enough to add 3 new charges to her growing collection of legal problems. I uploaded it to cloud storage, then sent encrypted copies to both my lawyer and the prosecutor's office, and just in case, I made one last backup, burned it to a disk, sealed it in an envelope, and dropped it in my gun safe under the floor. I'd seen people like Karen before, but I'd never had one threaten to burn my life down in my own front yard, while still trying to pass it off as neighborly conflict resolution. She thought I'd be rattled. What she didn't understand, and what most people never do, is that I didn't come here to play homeowner. I came here to disappear, to recover, to live quiet. But I'd spent 15 years dealing with institutional rot, and I knew a virus when I saw one. Now I was watching it up close, and I was documenting everything. By sunrise the next morning, the recording of Karen's threats had already landed in the inbox of the assistant district attorney. I'd marked it urgent. By mid-morning, I got a call back. Not from a clerk, not a paralegal, but the ADA herself. "Mr. Donovan," she said, calm and clear, "I've listened to the file. It's informative. You're right to be concerned. I'm initiating a preliminary inquiry. We'll need a sworn statement, and I'd like to assign a detective to your case within the next 48 hours. "Make it 24, I said. She threatened arson, trespass, and all but confessed to document fraud, saw on tape. "You'll get a detective by tonight." I hung up, my pulse steady, but something deep in my chest was humming. Not fear exactly, more like alertness fused to instinct, the kind you develop after too many years testifying against land syndicates that don't appreciate exposure. Before noon, I was at the sheriff's office filing for a temporary restraining order. I attached transcripts of Karen's visit, GPS timestamps, and the full audio. I also included the county registry screenshots showing the fraudulent entry. The deputy who processed my paperwork squinted at the stack, then gave me a look I hadn't seen since my federal days. That quick flicker of someone realizing they were standing at the edge of a much bigger fire. This woman the same Karen Brinslin who's president of Silverbrush Lake's HOA. She is. The deputy didn't say anything else, just stamped the file and told me I'd be notified as soon as a judge reviewed it. Back home, I didn't waste time. I rewired the perimeter cameras, adjusting field of vision to overlap with blind spots, installed 2 additional motion-activated units on trees flanking the guest house, replaced the outdated front door lock with a reinforced smart deadbolt, and added a steel reinforcement bar to the back door. I wasn't being paranoid. I was eliminating the possibility of regret. Around 4 that afternoon, the email came in. The property action freeze had been approved. The county officially marked my parcel as contested private ownership, subject to investigation. It meant no further claims, no city zoning actions, and, most importantly, no sales, transfers, or liens. My land legally frozen in place. But just as I started to breathe again, my phone buzzed. The name on the screen stopped me cold. Office of County Records, request for interview. I answered. A man with a clipped tone, professional but tense, introduced himself as Daniel Lynn, special investigator with the State Licensing Board. He'd received my flagged complaint and was reviewing a pattern of irregularities involving property reassignment. And Silverbrush Lake's HOA was at the center. "We've had 3 similar filings in the last 18 months, he said. Properties quietly marked abandoned, processed into HOA control, then resold. Some with falsified board votes, some with incorrect signatures, all through the same regional notary." "The same notary that's been retired for 3 years, I asked. "Exactly," he said. "We've been building a case, but we didn't have a cooperating witness. You may have just changed that." "I've got more," I said. "I've been documenting. There's metadata, local map overlays, communication logs, and there's something else you need to see." I walked to my desk, opened my encrypted drive, and pulled up a copy of a flyer I'd retrieved from the back gate the night before. Someone had stapled it there, probably in the dark. It was printed on cheap paper, unbranded, anonymous, but the language was unmistakable. Community notice. Mr. Donovan is not the legal owner of Parcel 47B. He is unlawfully occupying community land. The HOA is working diligently to correct the issue. We ask for patience and cooperation. I emailed it to Lynn while we were on the call. He went quiet for several seconds after reading it. "This is targeted harassment," he said. "If HOA leadership is attempting to sway neighborhood perception using false legal claims, we're beyond civil liability. We're in the territory of organized fraudulent enterprise." Tell that to the car that's been parked across from my driveway the last 2 nights, I said. He didn't laugh. Neither did I. Lynn arranged to meet me in person the following day to collect statements and evidence. I packed everything into a secured binder, copies of my deed, my federal assignment papers, the recordings, maps, timestamps, the mysterious flyer, even screenshots from my security camera that caught the flyer being posted. The figure in the video wore a hoodie, but I was willing to bet the cut of the shoulders matched Karen's nephew, the same guy who once stormed a planning meeting when the HOA denied his backyard zipline request. These people didn't learn boundaries. They manufactured them. That night, I slept with the hallway lights on just in case. Around 2:30, motion sensors on the western slope triggered my phone. I pulled up the live feed. A shape moved quickly along the tree line, stopped near the edge of the guest house, then disappeared back into the woods. Whoever it was didn't approach, didn't try to break in. They were watching. Testing response time. My hand hovered over the call button for the sheriff, but I waited. I wanted more. Let them get comfortable. Let them believe I was asleep, because I wasn't. Not anymore. The following morning was colder than usual. Fog drifted low across the trees, and the sun hadn't yet climbed past the ridge when Daniel Lynn pulled into my driveway. He stepped out of a state-marked sedan, dressed not in a suit, but in a field jacket and boots. Practical. I liked him immediately. He took one look around the property, eyes pausing on my reinforced gate and the new motion-activated cameras tucked under the eaves, then gave a small, approving nod. "You weren't exaggerating," he said. I invited him inside, and we got to work. For the next 2 hours, we reviewed everything, every piece of documentation I had. The deed, the notarized purchase agreement, the title clearance report from the original sale. I watched him flip through the fraudulent HOA protocol papers and grimace. When he reached the flyer, he set it aside gently, like evidence at a crime scene. "This isn't just internal misconduct," he said. "This is racketeering. Real estate fraud, coercion, malicious misrepresentation. If this turns out to be a pattern, and your case is the keystone, it could bury half the HOA board." I poured him coffee while he started matching metadata from the flyer to timestamps on the security footage. "Karen's nephew," I offered, pointing to a frame where the figure's gait and build were partially visible. "He's sloppy." Lynn smirked faintly. "He might have just earned himself a subpoena." Then he paused, finger on the tablet. "This frame, here, that light in the window, far left side. Is that your guest house?" "Yeah." "Is it occupied?" "Number it's just used for storage right now." "Then someone was in there." I leaned in. The screen showed a flash, too deliberate to be a sensor, coming from behind the curtain. A quick flare, like a phone screen lighting up, taken with the earlier prowling near the guest house. It meant someone was scouting from the inside. I grabbed my keys and my holster. "Wait," Lynn said. "Let me call the sheriff first." I nodded, but still unlocked the safe by the door and removed my registered Glock. I wasn't planning to use it, but I wasn't going in unarmed either. 10 minutes later, a sheriff's deputy arrived and swept the guest house. No one inside. But the back window had been pried open, and a faint imprint of mud crossed the threshold. Someone had entered, maybe watched us, maybe planned something worse. The deputy filed a report and said he'd add it to the open file on HOA-related disturbances. "You're not the first to complain about Silverbrush Lakes," he said, almost too casually. "But you might be the first one who has the receipts." Lynn spent the rest of the afternoon taking photos, GPS mapping my lot boundaries, and photographing the HOA's new illegal signage that someone had posted again near my mailbox. They were getting bolder, or careless, probably both. By late afternoon, I'd had enough. I drove into town and met with my real estate attorney, Amanda Polk, a pit bull in a blouse. She specialized in property fraud, and I'd worked with her once on a case involving a fake subdivision that bilked elderly landowners out of their titles. When she read through the HOA's fake abandonment declaration and saw the fake emergency vote record, her expression darkened. "This isn't just fraud," she said. "It's predatory acquisition. If we prove they've done this more than once, we're in civil RICO territory." She didn't hesitate. That same day, we filed a cease and desist demand against Silverbrush Lakes HOA and Karen Brinslin personally, a formal complaint to the Colorado State Board of HOA Oversight, a motion with the county court requesting an emergency hearing on land ownership fraud, A notification to the Office of the Attorney General regarding potential systemic abuse by a registered HOA. Amanda also requested access to the HOA's voting records, board meeting transcripts, and community action protocols through discovery. They'd be legally obligated to comply, unless they had something to hide, which of course they did. That night, while I was sitting at the dining room table with files spread across every surface, I got another call. Not from a blocked number this time. It was Karen. I let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, the message buzzed through. Miles, I think things are getting out of hand. We should talk. No lawyers, just us. I can fix this. If you'd just stop with these filings, it'd all go away. You're making it harder than it needs to be. The voice was calm, sweet even, but I could hear the stress behind the smoothness. The HOA was cracking. I didn't call back. Instead, I forwarded the voicemail to Amanda. Her reply, she's not just desperate, she's panicking. Good, because for the first time since this began, I had momentum. The system wasn't ignoring me, it was turning to face her. And I wasn't letting up now. I woke up the next morning to a sound I didn't expect. Silence. No cars idling across the road. No fake joggers pretending to stretch by my mailbox. No HOA flyers stapled to my gate overnight. Just the low creak of the pines swaying in the early wind and the distant sound of a hawk hunting breakfast. That kind of silence meant one of two things. They were giving up, or they were regrouping. And knowing Karen Brinslin, she wasn't the type to retreat. While my coffee brewed, I sat down at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. I had new emails, 6 of them. 3 were from Amanda. Filings received, motions scheduled, and 1 marked Discovery Bombshell. The other 3 were from neighbors. Not my direct neighbors. I didn't technically have any within a few hundred feet, but homeowners from the Silverbrush Lakes HOA district. Each of them wrote a variation of the same thing. I think the HOA is lying to us. We were told your house was foreclosed and condemned. Did you really threaten Karen's life? That's what she said. I'm not sure who to believe anymore. It was clear Karen was waging a quiet propaganda war, feeding the HOA members lies to keep them in line, distracting from the storm brewing on her doorstep. I couldn't fault the residents. Most of them had no idea how these organizations worked, but I could respond, so I did. I composed a short, direct email and attached a PDF of my deed, the restraining order, and the state's formal property freeze notice. Then I added the audio file, the one where Karen threatens arson and admits to faking the abandonment protocol, and sent it to all 3 neighbors, politely recommending they review the facts before further communication. Then I got in my truck and drove straight to the Silverbrush Lakes HOA Community Center. It was a quaint little building, faux rustic, with a fake stone chimney and a bulletin board outside that hadn't changed since Clinton was president. I parked right in front, walked in, and found a young woman at the desk typing on her phone. Is Karen Brinslin in? She blinked. She's not available. I smiled. Then tell her Miles Donovan stopped by, and let her know I'll be attending tonight's board meeting as an observer. She frowned. Those meetings are closed to non-members. Wrong, I said. According to the Colorado HOA Transparency Act, any meeting involving discussion of community property holdings must be publicly posted and open to affected parties. That includes adjacent landowners in disputes. I'll be there. She looked down, muttered something under her breath, and I walked out. That evening, just before 7, I returned. I brought Amanda with me. She wore a business suit that could peel paint off walls and carried a folder thick with filings. The moment we walked into the room, the energy shifted. Half a dozen board members sat at a long, fake wood table. Karen was dead center, wearing a blazer and an expression carved out of ice. Around the room, maybe 20 residents sat quietly in folding chairs, most of them older, clutching tote bags or whispering behind their hands. Karen spotted me, her eyes narrowing for a fraction of a second, then smoothing over into that same smirk she'd worn during our first meeting. Mr. Donovan, she said, how lovely of you to join us. Although this is a board discussion, not a courtroom. Amanda stepped forward, and yet you've turned it into both. She dropped the file on the table. A thick thwack echoed across the hall. Everyone jumped slightly. These are legal filings. Cease and desist orders, audio evidence, records of your falsified abandonment protocol, illegal registry amendments, and harassment campaigns. And, surprise, you're being formally investigated by the state licensing board for HOA misconduct. This is your notice." Karen's face tightened. "You have no right to hijack our meeting." "On the contrary," Amanda said, "as counsel to a directly affected property owner, I have every right to attend and deliver formal notice. And, Mr. Donovan has every right to witness the proceedings, given that your fraudulent actions attempted to illegally seize his home." Gasps rippled through the room. One man stood up. "Wait, his home? You told us he was a squatter." "That the property was unclaimed." Karen tried to speak, but Amanda was already handing out copies of the deed and freeze order. It didn't take long. Within 10 minutes, half the room was asking questions Karen couldn't answer. A woman in the back accused her of misleading the community. Another demanded to know if other properties had been taken the same way. And just like that, the wall began to crack. Karen slammed the gavel and adjourned the meeting, her voice barely concealing panic. As Amanda and I walked out, I caught one final glance over my shoulder. Karen was still sitting there, hands clenched, eyes darting between her own board members. She was losing control, and she knew it. By the next morning, 2 board members had resigned. One of them emailed Amanda directly, offering to cooperate in exchange for immunity, and the dominoes kept falling. I didn't expect her to give up. Not Karen Brinslin. Losing control only meant she'd find a more desperate lever to pull. 2 days after the board meeting, my mailbox was torn off its post. No theft, no note, just gone. Splintered wood, tire tracks in the gravel, and silence. Subtle message, I guess. Very HOA. I reported it to the county sheriff again. The deputy who came out was the same one who'd responded during the guest house incident. He scratched his chin, looked over the torn post, and said, "Subtle as a brick," through a stained glass window. He offered to add extra patrols around the property. I thanked him, but I knew if anything happened, it wouldn't be while cops were watching. It would be when they weren't. That night, I checked the cameras. Motion alerts from 3:14 a.m. showed 2 figures walking the edge of the forest line, far enough to technically remain off my land, but close enough to remind me they knew where the cameras were. Flashlights off. Silent. One of them stared up at the lens for a solid 5 seconds before turning and walking back into the trees. I downloaded the footage and sent it to Amanda and to Detective Lynn. The reply came quickly. "We'll trace the boots." That stare. That's not random. Someone wanted to be seen. But I wasn't rattled. Not anymore. I'd spent over a decade testifying against corrupt land developers and shady property schemes. I'd been threatened before. The difference was, this time it was personal, and the people doing it were cartoon villains with delusions of sovereignty. The following morning, Amanda called me with an update. "I just spoke with the state board," she said, "and the findings from discovery are worse than we thought." "How bad?" "Bad enough that the board has filed a motion to immediately suspend Silverbrush Lake's HOA's authority pending a full audit. Karen's internal vote records faked. Her emergency protocols never ratified. And get this, she's missing about $200,000 in dues." I whistled. "Embezzlement? Looks like it. And she's been wiring some of that into shell LLCs tied to her cousin in Nevada. The audit team's getting warrants." This was no longer a local nuisance or a territorial squabble. It was organized theft, hidden under a veil of community leadership. Amanda also confirmed that the district attorney's office was officially taking over. Lynn had passed along everything: recordings, testimony, legal filings, digital evidence, and it was now part of an active criminal investigation. "Expect things to escalate," Amanda warned. "When people like Karen feel the walls closing in, they lash out." She wasn't wrong. That same evening, just as the sun was dipping behind the ridge, I heard tires screech up my gravel drive. A large SUV stopped just short of the gate. 2 men jumped out. No uniforms, no HOA badges this time. Just dark hoodies and aggressive postures. They didn't try the gate. They stood just on the other side of the property line, shouting threats. "Hey, Donovan, you think you're smart. You don't know who you're messing with. Lawyer ain't gonna help when you're buried in legal fees and dirt, pal." I walked out onto the porch, calm, camera in hand. My phone was already dialing 911 on silent. I raised the camera, aimed, and smiled. One of them threw a rock. It hit the gate and clattered harmlessly to the ground. The operator picked up. I gave my name, address, and a description. Less than 5 minutes later, sirens howled down the road. The 2 goons jumped in the SUV and peeled out, but not before my cameras got a full shot of the license plate. When the police arrived, I handed over the footage. This time, the officer took it seriously. He asked if I wanted to press charges. I said yes. Every damn one. Amanda followed up the next morning. The plate was registered to a private security firm, one with prior citations for unlicensed enforcement action. Guess who had hired them? Karen Brinslin. She'd crossed the line from fraud to intimidation, and now it was all being logged, documented, and stacked like kindling for the courtroom bonfire. But the real surprise came later that afternoon. I was working outside, reinforcing the fence posts, when an older woman in a wool cardigan approached from the HOA side of the property line. She looked nervous, like she was sneaking out of prison. She introduced herself as Doris Keene, one of the original HOA board members. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, glancing over her shoulder, "but I needed to tell someone. I think we've all been lied to." She handed me a manila envelope. Inside were photocopies of emails, internal memos, altered meeting notes, proof that Karen had been using Doris's digital signature to pass board votes without her knowledge. I only found out when I asked why we never voted on your property. Karen got quiet, told me it was classified by emergency quorum. That's not a thing. She was trembling, not just from age, from fear. "You're not the only one she's tried this on," she said, "but you're the first one who didn't just roll over." I walked her back to the road, promised Amanda would keep her name out of anything public. But Doris had made a choice, one that could crack the entire scheme wide open. Karen had lost control. The board was turning, and now her own people were starting to defect. The morning after Doris handed me the envelope, everything moved fast. By noon, Amanda had filed an emergency motion to freeze all HOA financial accounts. The judge approved it within hours. Simultaneously, the DA's office issued a search warrant for the HOA's office and Karen's home. I didn't need to be there to know the walls were finally caving in on her. But I was there when the sheriff's SUV rolled down my drive around 3 p.m. This time, it wasn't about a complaint or report. It was about closure. "Thought you'd like to know," Deputy Lynn said, stepping out. "We picked up Karen an hour ago. Fraud, conspiracy, threats, attempted unlawful seizure, and a few others we're still counting." I blinked. "No fireworks?" He grinned. She tried to say it was all a misunderstanding. Then she lawyered up before the cuffs clicked. I thanked him and offered coffee, which he politely declined. Then I watched the SUV head back down the hill and out of my life. Or so I thought. A few days later, the story broke wide. Local news ran the footage of Karen being led out in cuffs. Former board members came forward. Doris gave a quiet interview. The HOA's books, once hidden, turned into a forensic accountant's dream. Misused funds, duplicate invoices, and bribes to a clerk in the county records office. Karen's empire crumbled in public. When the trial began, I was called as the key witness. Amanda stood beside me, fierce and sharp. The audio recording of Karen's threat, the forged documents, and the fake abandonment protocol all landed like hammers. Doris testified. So did one of the goons, cutting a deal to avoid jail by confirming Karen hired them to send a message. In the end, the jury took less than 4 hours. Karen Brinslin was found guilty on 7 counts, including real estate fraud, criminal conspiracy, intimidation, and falsifying public records. She got 16 years. Several of her board allies took deals for lesser sentences. The HOA was formally dissolved by court order. Its funds were seized and distributed back to defrauded homeowners. I went back to my quiet life. Mostly. Reporters came for a while. Other property owners reached out. Amanda and I began helping others with similar HOA abuse cases. I testified in 2 more trials. But one afternoon, months later, I stood at my gate with a chisel and hammer carving a slab of stone I had hauled in from a quarry upstate. I set it firmly at the entrance, right beside where the old mailbox used to be. The words read, "Private property, not subject to HOA. Trespassers will be recorded, reported, and embarrassed." And beneath that, "This land belongs to a man who doesn't forget."